Hello, this is a brief summary of Catholic theology. If anything you hear is inconsistent with official church teaching, I suggest you go with the official church teaching. I have some education, just a master's, but you really need a PhD to do this stuff right. So, just personally, my favorite feast is not Easter, but it's Christmas, because that's when Jesus was born. I think that the disciples, the apostles, recognized the divinity of Jesus before the resurrection. They were already following him. So it based on what he'd done and what he'd said up to that time. Now we hear a lot in Catholic theology about substance. Jesus is the same substance as the Father. Substance doesn't translate very well. It doesn't have a definite meaning in English because it comes from a Greek word. I learned that in one of the courses I took. So something of the same substance is a homoousios. I guess ousios must mean substance. And if it's a similar substance, you call it a homoiousios. Homo means same. And homoiousios, I was told, means like substance, similar substance. So anyway, Jesus is homoousios with the Father. That's from the Council of Nicaea, I think. Now, what does substance mean in English, modern English? I think it means the most important characteristic. We know from modern science that every piece of matter has many characteristics. Molecules, heat, color, how resistant to light it is, or how much radiation, and for bigger things, what shape it is, what we use it for. All those things are characteristics. And I think they get their name from what humans give them, why a certain thing is important to a human. In Philosophy 101, we hear about substance and accidents, which are secondary substances, secondary characteristics. That's still a translation from the Greek, kind of a transliteration. So a thing might be a chair because it's made out of wood, and it could be any color, but we don't care what color it is because it's still a chair. But if we have a different purpose for it, like if it's a wooden chair and we need something to throw in the fire for firewood, it becomes firewood, not a chair anymore. And we again don't care what color it is. So we're talking about Jesus, same substance as the Father. I think it's the same essential characteristic, the same most important characteristic. So what is that? I think that the divine characteristic of Jesus is seeing the truth and saying it. That's a summary. Any language is limited when you're talking about profound ideas like that. But I think it's something like that. Now, at the time of Jesus, from what I've read, the Jewish culture had put a big emphasis on the connection between personal behavior and success or happiness. So if someone was unhappy or poor, it was generally blamed on something that person had done that was wrong, something sinful, or perhaps something that person's parents had done or ancestors had done. But someone, the thought was, had sinned, had offended God, and the bad condition of this person at the present was a result of that previous sin. I haven't read enough or studied enough Jewish theology to know how accurate our Christian summaries of that are. But it seems to me that there was an overemphasis at the time on that. It also seems to me that Jesus saw that and said, well, wait a minute, that can't be right. What about that tower that fell on those guys over, I forget what town it was, and a bunch of them were killed. Maybe 12 were killed. I should look it up, but I didn't look it up this time. But in one of those Gospels, Jesus is saying, well, who says that those people who were killed when the tower fell were more sinful than the people next to them who didn't get killed? And things along that line. And then the famous Sermon on the Mount, or I think in Luke they call it the Sermon on the Plain, and so they try to reconcile it. Maybe it was a flat place on a mountain. Anyway, so he says, blessed are the poor. So that's a shocking thing to hear if you've always thought that if somebody's poor, it's their own fault, or maybe their parents' fault, or their grandparents' fault. And he's saying, blessed are those poor people. Blessed are they who mourn. Those other things, I'm not going to try to get them all. I'll forget. And you can look it up. It's in Matthew someplace, the famous ones. And Luke has his own version of it. Anyway, so that's a shocking thing. So out of that emphasis on poor people and trying to help people, it's not their own fault. We have a lot of Christian theology that tries to help them. And I've noticed just from my own experience, there's a lot of Jewish people involved in helping poor people too. And the Jewish also had a thing of forgiving the sins that had accumulated over the year. They'd symbolically tie them on the back of, I think it was a goat, and you drive the goat out into the desert, sort of to give you a fresh start. But by now, the idea of personal unhappiness being not really your own fault has been widely accepted. And I think actually we've gone too far the other way, that some suffering, it really is our own fault. Decisions we make, or possibly decisions our parents made that cause us a lot of problems, wrong actions we've done. But more fundamentally, I think that characteristic that I thought I mentioned earlier, the divine characteristic of Jesus, was seeing the truth and saying it. We've all been in that situation. We saw something and thought it was right and maybe spoke up, but probably more often didn't, because there's a lot of bad consequences if you say something that is not widely accepted. And of course, you might be wrong. But when you're right, we should say it. A lot of prudence is involved. We have responsibilities to other people. Some of us have families. Sometimes it's not the right time to say something, or it's too shocking, or you have to kind of hint at something just to get the other person thinking. But anyway, that's what I think is the fundamental divine characteristic of Jesus. And I think the disciples recognized that, and it was such a revelation to them that they recognized him as unique. Well, it can go on. There's a lot more details in this, but I'll stop this for now.